In the quiet farmlands of Pennsylvania, hidden beyond the rolling hills and the fog-draped woods, stands a monument to human ambition and failure. It was called Ravenswood Asylum. Built in the late 19th century, its creators claimed it would heal broken minds. But behind its iron gates, hope decayed and shadows began to grow.
The birth of Ravenswood. The 1880s were an age of optimism in America. Cities grew, science advanced, and medicine sought to tame the mysteries of the human mind. But mental illness was still poorly understood. Families who could not handle a troubled son, a grieving widow, or a rebellious daughter often pleaded for answers. The state promised them salvation, asylums. Ravenswood was one of these. Construction began in 1881 on a secluded plot of land chosen precisely for its isolation. The building followed the Kirkbride plan, a design philosophy that insisted architecture itself could cure. Long wings extended outward to separate patients. High ceilings allowed sunlight to stream in. Lush gardens were planned for calm walks and reflection. To the public, Ravenswood was not a prison, it was a palace of hope. When it opened in 1883, the newspapers praised it as a triumph of modern medicine. Dignitaries toured the halls, marveling at its grand staircases, its tiled corridors, its manicured lawns. Families brought their loved ones, believing they would be cared for, even cured. But within weeks, the illusion began to crack.
Among the first admitted was a young soldier, haunted by nightmares of the Civil War. Another was a widow who wept uncontrollably after losing her child. But Ravenswood did not only house the sick, it housed the unwanted. Women were locked away for hysteria. Alcoholics were dumped by families who lost patience. Orphans and elderly who had nowhere else to go found themselves behind the gates. What was meant to be a place of healing quickly became a dumping ground for society's castaways. Doctors prescribed strict routines: wake at dawn, eat bland meals, attend therapy sessions, work in the gardens. To outsiders, it sounded orderly, but patients described it differently. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into years. Individuality was stripped away. Everyone wore the same uniforms, followed the same rules. And slowly, the asylum began to fill.
Cracks in the system. Ravenswood was built for 500 patients. By the 1890s, it already held more than 800. Overcrowding suffocated the halls. Beds were crammed side by side. Hallways converted into makeshift dormitories. Disease spread easily. Supplies dwindled. With limited staff, compassion gave way to control. Patients who resisted were strapped into restraints. Those who screamed too loudly were locked into solitary rooms, dark cells where the only sound was their own breath. Families who came to visit were sometimes turned away, told their relatives were unfit for company. Letters went unanswered. Slowly, patients vanished from the outside world, forgotten even by those who loved them.
A shift in medicine. At the turn of the century, the medical community embraced harsher methods: electroshock therapy, hydrotherapy, submerging patients in freezing or scalding baths. Later, crude lobotomies. Ravenswood adopted them all. Records describe men convulsing on tables, women held under icy water until their skin turned pale. Some survived, many did not. But the asylum's reports painted a different picture: progress, treatment, success. To the public, Ravenswood remained a beacon. To those inside, it was hell.
The building itself, even the architecture, played a role in the terror. The asylum was vast, its hallways stretching into darkness. Identical wings made navigation disorienting. At night, oil lamps flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. The building groaned with every shift of the wind, as if alive. The basement was the most feared. It held storage rooms, boilers, and experimental wards. Patients whispered of cries echoing from the pipes, of footsteps when no one was there. Staff refused to go alone. Some said the basement itself breathed.
The Forgotten. By the 1920s, Ravenswood held nearly 2,000 patients. Many died quietly, their bodies buried in unmarked graves behind the asylum. Records went missing, names were lost. One story endures, that of Eleanor Hart, a 22-year-old woman admitted for hysteria. Within a month, she disappeared from the books. When her family asked, the asylum claimed she had died of illness, but no grave was ever marked. Some believe she still wanders the South Wing, searching for the life stolen from her.
Ravenswood Asylum was born from hope, but hope rotted into cruelty. For decades, it consumed the forgotten, the unwanted, the abandoned. And though its doors have long been closed, the building still remembers. Its walls whisper, its shadows move, and some believe its patients never left. If the walls of Ravenswood could speak, they would not tell stories of healing. They would tell stories of suffering, endless, brutal, and unforgettable. Daily life in Ravenswood. On the surface, life inside Ravenswood looked structured. Patients woke at dawn, ate meals in silence, and were marched into workshops or gardens. But this routine wasn't about recovery, it was about control. Meals were meager, watery soup, hard bread, milk gone sour. Winters froze the wards, while summers suffocated them in stench and heat. Patients were treated less as people and more as bodies to be managed. A man grieving too loudly was labeled unstable. A woman refusing to work became violent. Once branded, that label followed them until the end. Control was maintained with restraints, straitjackets, leather straps, iron cuffs. Patients were tied down for hours, sometimes days, their cries ignored. And then there were the isolation cells, tiny, windowless rooms where patients sat on bare mattresses listening only to their own heartbeat. Staff called it discipline. Survivors called it a living death.
By the early 20th century, Ravenswood became a playground for harsh experiments disguised as medicine. Electroshock therapy was routine. Patients convulsed under jolts of electricity, teeth breaking, bodies seizing, memories burning away. Doctors praised it as progress. Hydrotherapy followed, submerged in freezing water or wrapped in ice-soaked sheets until skin turned blue. Others were scalded in boiling baths, their screams echoing down the halls. And then came lobotomies. With hammer and ice pick, surgeons pierced skulls to sever brain tissue. Many emerged hollow shells. Some never woke again. Certain names linger in whispers. Henry, A war veteran plagued by voices endured 42 shock sessions in 2 months. On the 43rd, his heart failed. His death was marked simply as cardiac arrest. Margaret, a 14-year-old orphan deemed defiant, refused to work in the laundry. For punishment, she was locked in isolation. 3 weeks later, when staff opened the door, she was gone. No body, no explanation. And Eleanor Hart, one of many whose files disappeared completely. Her name erased, her fate never revealed. Families asked, but the asylum gave only silence. Nights inside Ravenswood were endless. Screams drifted through the halls. Pipes moaned. Doors slammed. Footsteps echoed, though no one walked. Patients feared sleep, terrified they would wake strapped to a table or not wake at all. Nurses called the wards restless. Objects shifted without touch. Patients whispered to figures no one else could see. Some swore the asylum itself fed on fear, amplifying every cry, every shadow.
When the gates of Ravenswood closed in 1965, silence did not follow. The voices of its patients lingered, and the building refused to rest. Locals often spoke of a figure standing at a third-floor window of the south wing. A pale woman in a hospital gown, staring down with hollow eyes. Police who entered found nothing but dust and broken furniture. Some say she is Eleanor Hart, the patient who disappeared without a record. Others believe she is just one of many forgotten souls. The basement is infamous. Paranormal investigators reported screams echoing from the pipes as though the agony of hydrotherapy still lives there. Recordings captured faint voices, "Don't leave me here." Others claimed to hear chains dragging across the floor in complete darkness.
The most feared apparition is the man with the covered face. Witnesses describe a tall figure, head wrapped in cloth, standing motionless at the end of corridors. Some say he walks toward anyone who dares stare too long, footsteps heavy, echoing, unstoppable.
In the 1980s, college students sneaked inside. Their flashlights flickered and died. One swore a child's laugh echoed behind him, followed by cold fingers brushing his neck. When they ran, they found the gate locked from the inside. Minutes later, it opened on its own. They never returned. Even former nurses admitted the place was never normal. Patients vanished from locked rooms only to reappear confused hours later. Shadows moved where no light touched. One nurse wrote, "The building remembers, and it punishes."
Stories of Ravenswood's hauntings were more than just whispers. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, even journalists all walked into the asylum with cameras and recorders. Many walked out shaken. Some refused to speak of what they saw.
In the late 1970s, local ghost hunters entered with reel-to-reel recorders. Hours of silence passed until one tape played back with a voice none of them had heard in the moment. It was faint, but clear enough. "Help me." When they returned days later, the same recorder captured the sound of heavy breathing in an empty room. One member quit the group immediately, claiming something had followed him home.
By the 1990s, more advanced teams came with infrared cameras, and EVP devices. They reported sudden temperature drops from 70 degrees to freezing within seconds. Footsteps echoed in the halls behind them, though no one appeared. One investigator described seeing a figure in thermal imaging, cold, human-shaped, standing in the corner. When they turned their flashlights, the corner was empty. But the most chilling evidence came from a session in the basement. A simple question was asked: "Who's here with us?" The reply, captured on tape, was a guttural whisper: "Mine."
Perhaps the most famous account came from a television crew in 2002. They filmed a special on America's haunted locations. Inside Ravenswood, batteries drained instantly, cameras malfunctioned, and microphones picked up faint cries. When the crew tried to leave, they found the front gate, rusted, heavy, chained open when they arrived, now locked tight. It took over an hour for emergency workers to pry it loose. The footage shows the crew standing pale, shaking, refusing to re-enter the grounds.
What makes Ravenswood different is consistency. Teams separated by decades, using different technology, reported the same things. The woman in the window, the chains in the basement, a male voice commanding them to leave. Not one group has emerged without evidence or without fear.
Among the countless stories that haunt Ravenswood, one stands above them all, a legend spoken in whispers. They call him the Last Patient. When the asylum closed in 1965, records say the final patients were transferred to other facilities, but some staff insisted one man remained. His name was lost, some say intentionally erased, but those who worked the last weeks spoke of a figure who refused to leave. He was described as tall, gaunt, and silent. Shackled often to prevent violent outbursts, he wandered the basement corridors, muttering to himself. When the order came to evacuate, he resisted, and in the chaos of closure, he simply vanished. No file, no body, only whispers. Since then, visitors claim to hear chains dragging across the floor of the asylum's basement, heavy, metallic, echoing through the dark. Some say it is the sound of the last patient, pacing endlessly, unable to rest. Paranormal teams reported capturing the sound on tape. One EVP session asked, "Who are you?" The reply came back distorted, but chillingly human. "Still here." Witnesses describe seeing him as a shadowed figure with restraints still clamped around his wrists. He is said to appear at the far end of a hallway, standing motionless until the lights flicker, then suddenly closer, step by step. One investigator swore the figure charged at them, chains rattling. The video ends abruptly as the camera falls, the operator screaming. When recovered, the equipment was damaged, but no one else was in the footage. Others say he does not chase, but follows. Slow, relentless, always just far enough to keep you looking back. Unlike other spirits tied to specific rooms or wards, the last patient seems to roam the entire asylum. Reports place him in the basement, the third floor, even standing in the overgrown gardens at night. But every account shares one detail: a suffocating weight in the air. Witnesses describe feeling watched, their chests tightening, as if the asylum itself is breathing through them. Some say this is not just a ghost, it is the asylum's final prisoner, its keeper, its warden, trapped and trapping others.
When the gates of Ravenswood closed in 1965, silence did not follow. The building was abandoned, but it did not die. Instead, it decayed year by year, transforming into something far more terrifying.
With no caretakers, nature reclaimed the asylum. Vines crept up the brick walls, windows shattered in storms, roofs sagged and collapsed. Inside, paint peeled like rotting flesh, floors warped, and rust consumed iron doors. The once proud gardens became wild thickets. Graves in the asylum's yard sank into the earth, their markers lost or stolen. Ravenswood no longer looked like a hospital, it looked like a mausoleum.
The ruin drew attention. Teenagers dared each other to enter, chasing thrills with flashlights and cigarettes. Many fled after minutes, claiming they felt watched, their laughter silenced by unseen footsteps. Urban explorers came in the 1980s, documenting the decay with cameras. They left with more than photographs, stories of doors slamming behind them, whispers on their tapes, shadows in their frames. Even vandals hesitated to return. Graffiti artists spoke of spray cans flying from their hands, pushed by invisible force. Thieves who tried to strip copper pipes swore something growled at them in the dark.
The nearby town grew uneasy. Residents avoided the road leading to the gates. Farmers whispered of strange lights glowing in the windows at night, though electricity had long been cut. Children spoke of dreams filled with endless corridors, of being chased by something they could never see. Police were called dozens of times to chase trespassers. Many officers admitted they would not go beyond the front yard. One said simply, "It feels wrong, like the building's alive." What unnerved visitors most was not just the ruin, but what remained. Wheelchairs still sat in hallways, rusted but unmoved. Beds stood in neat rows, mattresses long rotted. Restraints clung to walls, leather stiff with age. It was as if the asylum had been evacuated in a single breath, leaving its instruments of suffering behind as relics. Some swore the objects themselves carried energy. A chair that rocked on its own, a file cabinet that slammed shut when opened, a street jacket that smelled faintly of sweat, as if just worn.
Unlike other abandoned buildings, Ravenswood did not feel empty. Explorers described a pressure in the air, heavy and suffocating. Silence there was never silent. It was filled with faint breaths, tapping sounds, distant cries. One visitor wrote, "It feels like the building is waiting, as if it remembers everything and wants you to remember too."
Parents warned their children never to wander near the gates. Elders spoke of curses that befell anyone who mocked the asylum. Farmers claimed that animals refused to graze on the land closest to its walls, spooked by sounds no one else could hear. One legend told of a boy who entered on a dare in the 1970s. He was found hours later on the roadside, trembling, unable to speak. For weeks, he drew only one thing: endless hallways with no doors.
The road leading to the asylum earned its own reputation. Drivers reported headlights failing near the gates, radios filling with static, and shadows darting across the pavement. Some swore they saw figures standing along the roadside, figures in hospital gowns. only for them to vanish when approached. Locals began calling it the Dead Road. Few traveled it after dark.
Town residents often pointed to the asylum at night. They spoke of faces at the windows, dozens of them, watching silently from the upper floors. Some saw a man staring down, others a woman crying. Still others nothing but silhouettes shifting against broken glass. No matter how many times the windows shattered in storms, the faces always returned. Superstition grew strong. Some locals refused to say Ravenswood after nightfall, believing to name it was to call its spirits closer. In diners and bars, conversations dropped to whispers if the asylum was mentioned. One old man put it simply, "It doesn't like attention. If you talk too loud about it, it talks back." Generations grew up in the asylum's shadow. Children told ghost stories at sleepovers. Teenagers dared each other to touch the rusted gates. Adults avoided the subject entirely, their silence louder than words. The building was more than ruin. It was a presence, a looming reminder of suffering that had bled beyond its walls into the lives of those who lived nearby. In the 1950s, a young nurse named Clara worked night shifts in the women's ward. Her diary, later found by her family, revealed chilling details. She wrote of screams echoing through the halls with no source, of patients who vanished from locked rooms only to reappear confused hours later. She described the feeling of being watched every moment of every shift. One entry simply read, "The building listens, it knows us, and it doesn't want to let go."
A man named Samuel admitted in 1949 for what doctors called melancholia lived to tell his story. He claimed he was strapped down for electroshock dozens of times, his body convulsing until his teeth cracked. He said the treatments did not cure him, they broke him. After years inside, Samuel managed to escape through an unlocked service door. For the rest of his life, he refused to enter hospitals of any kind. Before his death in 1987, he told his grandson, "Ravenswood wasn't healing me, it was feeding on me." The Hart family, descendants of Eleanor, the woman erased from records, spent decades searching for answers. They were told she died of illness, yet no death certificate or grave was ever produced. In a recorded interview, her niece spoke with trembling voice. "We don't know where she went. It's like she disappeared into the walls. My mother believed Eleanor never left that place. And sometimes, I think she's still there." Not all accounts came from patients or families. In 1964, a year before closure, a former orderly anonymously contacted a local newspaper. He described conditions as inhuman, patients treated as experiments, not people. He warned, "When this building shuts down, it won't be empty. You cannot keep that much suffering trapped without consequence." The article was never published, but his letter survives. Those who left Ravenswood rarely spoke openly, but their silence spoke louder than words. Shattered lives, lingering trauma, and nightmares that lasted decades. Each account added to the asylum's shadow, not just a building of bricks and iron, but of memories etched into those who endured it. Stories can be dismissed as rumor, testimonies can be doubted, but what happens when the asylum leaves behind evidence?
In the late 1970s, urban explorers snuck into Ravenswood, armed with film cameras. When developed, some frames revealed more than ruins. One showed a woman in white standing in the south wing hallway, blurred yet undeniable. None of the group had seen her. Another photo captured dozens of pale faces staring from the windows, though the building had been empty for years. Skeptics called it tricks of light. Believers called it proof. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, became Ravenswood's most infamous evidence. Investigators left recorders in locked rooms only to return and hear voices on playback. Common were cries for help, moans, and whispers like, "Get out!" But one recording from the basement chilled even hardened skeptics. A voice rasped through the static, "Still here." Even audio experts struggled to explain it. The voice was layered, distorted, but undeniably human. Several videos surfaced over the decades. A rusted wheelchair rolling across a hallway on its own. Doors slamming with force, though no one touched them. In one case, a heavy gurney shifted several feet across a ward, captured on a night vision camera. Skeptics argued drafts, gravity, or staged hoaxes, but those who witnessed it swore the movement was violent, deliberate. In 2005, a professional paranormal group brought thermal cameras. On screen, they captured human-shaped figures colder than the surrounding air, standing still in corners. One image showed a tall figure wrapped in cloth, the exact description of the man with the covered face. Investigators reported feeling watched until they fled, leaving equipment behind. Perhaps the most disturbing evidence came from a documentary crew in 2011. Their night vision cameras caught a shadow moving independently across a ward. Moments later, their audio recorded a loud, metallic crash. When they ran, one camera fell, still recording. The final seconds showed a door slamming shut from the inside. No crew member had touched it. The footage aired only once before the network shelved the project, claiming it was too disturbing. By the early 2000s, the asylum was featured on countless blogs and forums. Adventurers with cameras crept through the halls, posting photos of peeling walls and rusted beds. Some went for the adrenaline, others for likes and clicks. But many found more than they bargained for. Reports of dead batteries, sudden nausea, and overwhelming dread filled their posts. Some swore their cameras captured faces none of them had seen.
With the rise of YouTube, Ravenswood became a hotspot for ghost hunting channels. Videos showed groups laughing at the legends until their laughter died in the dark. One clip from 2013 went viral. Two explorers joking in the basement when a door slammed shut behind them. The camera shook, catching only shadows rushing across the walls. Their screams filled the feed before the video cut. The upload ended with the words, "We're never going back." Another live stream in 2019 showed a streamer walking alone through the south wing. Thousands watched in real time as his flashlight flickered, the chat exploding with messages, "There's someone behind you." He turned. No one was there. Minutes later, the stream ended abruptly. His channel never updated again.
Not all explorers sought fame. Locals still dared each other to step inside, to touch the third-floor window, to walk the basement alone. Police records show several arrests over the years. Teenagers trembling, insisting they heard chains dragging through the dark. One group abandoned their car on the roadside, running miles back into town. When questioned, they only repeated one phrase: "He was following us." A handful of explorers reported something stranger: missing time. They entered the asylum at midnight, but when they emerged, dawn was breaking. Hours had vanished without memory. Their footage showed gaps, whole minutes where nothing was recorded, though the cameras never powered off. One explorer summed it up in a blog post: "Inside Ravenswood, the clock doesn't move forward. It swallows you. And when it spits you out, you're not the same." Not every scar left by Ravenswood is visible. For some who dared to enter, the asylum followed them home, not in chains or shadows, but in their minds.
Explorers often describe the same experience, the suffocating certainty of being observed. Even in empty corridors, eyes seem to press from the walls. Footsteps echo just behind. Many leave drenched in sweat, hearts racing, convinced something is breathing down their neck. Psychologists call it hypervigilance, but those who felt it inside Ravenswood insist it is more. They say the asylum itself studies you, waiting.
Several visitors report vivid nightmares after leaving, dreams of endless hallways, locked doors, and faceless figures at the foot of their beds. One woman described recurring dreams of chains dragging across her floor at night. Another man, after a brief visit, awoke screaming for weeks, convinced someone was whispering his name in the dark. Even skeptics admit the dreams are unnerving, too consistent to dismiss. Some speak of a silence so heavy it claws at the mind. In Ravenswood, even quiet feels alive, filled with unseen breaths, faint tapping, distant cries. One explorer wrote, "It's not the things you see, it's the things you hear inside your head. Thoughts that don't feel like yours."
Police reports mention trespassers found disoriented, trembling, unable to speak. A teenager was discovered outside the gates, clawing at his own skin, muttering, "They're still touching me." Another man, interviewed after a brief visit, confessed he couldn't be in dark rooms anymore. His doctor called it trauma-induced paranoia. He called it Ravenswood's gift.
Perhaps the most terrifying impact is what happens after leaving. Visitors describe shadows flitting across their homes, objects shifting at night, whispers echoing in their bedrooms. A paranormal investigator admitted, "The asylum doesn't just haunt you when you're inside, it comes with you. It infects you."
An abandoned asylum is more than just crumbling walls. For those drawn to the shadows, it becomes something else entirely. A doorway. Ravenswood did not only attract explorers, it attracted the occult.
By the late 1970s, locals reported strange gatherings at night, candles flickering in broken windows, chanting echoing across the fields. Police patrols found symbols painted on walls, altars built from broken furniture, and evidence of sacrifices, animal bones scattered in the basement. Some dismissed it as teenagers playing at the dark arts, Others believed something far more serious was happening. Graffiti inside the asylum wasn't just vandalism. Investigators documented pentagrams, runes, and occult sigils scorched into walls and floors. One symbol, repeated throughout the south wing, was later identified as a binding mark, used in rituals to trap spirits. If Ravenswood was already haunted, some feared these rituals chained the souls even tighter, feeding the building with rage and unrest.
A former police officer recalled responding to a call in 1982. Inside, he found 5 people in black robes chanting around a circle of blood. When the lights of his flashlight hit them, the chanting stopped, but he swore he heard another voice continue, coming from the walls. He left the force a year later. When asked why, he said only, "Ravenswood doesn't belong to the living." The basement became notorious as the heart of these rituals. Explorers found melted candle wax coating the floors, crude idols fashioned from bones, and walls scorched black from fire. Some claimed to see shadows forming circles on their own. Others spoke of cold air rushing like breath, extinguishing flames without wind. Rumors spread that certain groups returned regularly, believing the asylum's pain made it a perfect vessel to contact the dead, or worse, something beyond. Perhaps the darkest tale is of a summoning gone wrong. In the 1990s, a small group attempted to call on the spirits of the patients. What neighbors heard that night was not chanting, it was screaming. By dawn, police found the asylum empty, save for scattered candles and claw marks gouged deep into the concrete. The group was never identified. Some believe they fled. Others believe they were taken.
Ravenswood was built to contain madness, but in its ruin it has become something else, a shrine for those who seek the darkness. And each ritual, each symbol, each whisper only adds to the weight of its curse.
Since its closure in 1965, Ravenswood appeared often in local papers. Trespassers arrested in old asylum. Police respond to strange lights at Ravenswood. But occasionally, the news carried darker notes. In 1987, a journalist wrote of the most haunted building in Pennsylvania. The article detailed screams recorded on tape and unexplained injuries suffered by explorers. Letters to the editor flooded in, half demanding the asylum be demolished, half begging for it to remain as proof of the paranormal.
In the 1990s and early 2000s, paranormal TV boomed. Ravenswood became a staple location for ghost hunting shows. Viewers watched as investigators roamed its hallways with shaky night vision cameras whispering into the dark. One episode captured a door slamming so violently it cracked the plaster. Another showed a figure crossing the end of a hallway, though all crew members were accounted for. The footage became infamous, replayed on countless top 10 scariest moments lists.
Ravenswood's infamy soon reached Hollywood. Several horror films used it as inspiration. A hospital where patients never left, a doctor who experimented on souls instead of bodies, a spirit chained in a basement. Though the names changed, locals recognized the truth hidden beneath the fiction. In 2012, an indie film even shot scenes inside the asylum itself, The crew later admitted many refused to return for reshoots, citing unexplainable disturbances during filming.
In the age of social media, Ravenswood became legend online. Photos of its windows, claiming to show shadowy figures, spread across forums. YouTube filled with exploration videos, each chasing the next scare. Reddit threads debated whether the asylum was cursed, while others shared nightmares they swore came after merely looking at its pictures. For some, it was just entertainment. For others, it was a warning, proof that Ravenswood still held power, even through a screen.
Over time, Ravenswood stopped being just a location. It became shorthand for terror itself. A story parents used to keep children home at night, a challenge for thrill seekers, a myth woven so tightly into culture that even those who never set foot inside still felt its chill.
In the 1970s, developers proposed tearing down the asylum to build housing. Heavy equipment was brought to the grounds, yet within days, problems began. Machinery broke down without reason. Workers complained of dizziness, tools vanishing, sudden nosebleeds. After a series of accidents, including a collapsed crane that injured 2 men, the project was abandoned. Locals whispered the building had protected itself.
In the 1980s, historians argued Ravenswood should be preserved as a museum, a reminder of medical history's darkest chapters. Funding was gathered, tours were planned. But volunteers who spent nights cataloging the asylum's artifacts refused to return. They reported objects moving, doors slamming, and the sensation of being followed. Within months, the preservation effort dissolved. One organizer admitted, "The building doesn't want to be remembered. It wants to be feared."
Arsonists tried more than once to burn Ravenswood to the ground. In 1991, flames engulfed the East Ring. Yet by dawn, the fire died abruptly, leaving much of the building untouched. Firefighters noted something strange. The blaze avoided certain rooms entirely, as if guided. Another attempt in 2004 destroyed sections of the roof, but again, the core structure remained. Ravenswood seemed unwilling to fall. Over the decades, investors circled the property. Plans for hotels, parks, even a shopping center. Each time, paperwork was filed, money pledged, and each time the projects collapsed. Investors backed out, citing bad luck and unexplainable setbacks. One company spokesman famously said, "It's like the building doesn't want us here." And honestly, I don't blame it.
By the 2010s, officials stopped proposing changes. The town came to believe Ravenswood could not be destroyed, nor saved. It simply remained, looming, untouched. Its broken windows still stared down at the road. Its rusted gates still creaked in the wind. The asylum stood, as if daring anyone to try again and fail.
Demolition failed. Preservation failed. Even fire could not erase it. Ravenswood endures, not because it is strong, but because it is unwilling to die. And some believe It never will.
For over a century, Ravenswood has stood, first as a place of healing, then of torment, then of silence. Yet through every season, through every decade, one truth remained. The asylum never let go of what was inside.
The weight of history, the patients who suffered, the voices that echoed, the faces pressed against broken windows, all of it formed a story too heavy to vanish. Attempts to erase the building failed. Efforts to preserve it collapsed. Like a wound that refuses to close, Ravenswood lingers.
Legends speak of wanderers who entered and were never seen again. No bodies recovered, no explanations given. Explorers left their belongings behind, cameras, bags, even cars, but not themselves. Police dismissed it as rumor. Locals whispered it as warning. The asylum takes what it wants.
In 2017, 2 men live-streamed their exploration. Their footage showed the basement, chains dragging across concrete and whispers circling their microphones. Then the stream ended abruptly, cutting to black. The men were never identified. The channel deleted overnight. Only fragments of their broadcast remain, circulating online, fueling Ravenswood's legend.
Visitors agree on one thing. Ravenswood feels alive. Doors slam like heartbeat pulses. Air grows heavy, as though lungs inhale and exhale through the walls. Shadows move with intent. It is not simply haunted, it is aware. Is Ravenswood a monument to medical cruelty, cursed by its own sins? Is it a prison of restless spirits, forever pacing its corridors? Or is it something older, darker, using human suffering as fuel to stay alive? No one can answer. No one dares stay long enough to find out.
Tonight, the asylum still waits. Behind shattered glass, in the silence of rotting halls, it listens. And if you are quiet enough, you may hear it listening for you. Would you dare to step inside?